Thank you all very much. This is great. These are our friends. We have thousands of friends on this incredible movement. This was a movement like nobody's ever seen before.
I do think that this election is a little bit different than elections past.
I don't understand, given the information that is readily available to everyone, how anyone can support the fascist. I just don't get it.
Well, you'll hear Democrats and liberals a lot of the time. They'll be like, oh, he's a Nazi, he's going to use the police power against the people. But my question to them would be, if he was already in office, why didn't he do it the first time around?
Well, I think he's going to send back all the illegals, at least the worst ones. I don't think he's afraid of anybody.
Yeah, I really do think the word silent majority.
Hi, I'm Yaron Finkelstein, political strategist and advisor.
I've spent over 2 decades deeply involved in countless political elections for various leaders, premiers and governors. As global head of campaigns for one of the world's best campaign firms, I was a specialist advisor and strategist for winning contests across all democratic shapes and sizes. I've seen elections from the inside out, from planning to polling day. Here in Australia, that experience put me right in the centre circle with Scott Morrison for the so-called unwinnable miracle victory of 2019. And I was right there for the bruising loss in 2022. Although I've met with Donald Trump in the White House, man up close is very different to his political persona. I've been thoroughly intrigued with Donald Trump as a political winner. And this is my attempt to understand exactly how he keeps confounding political experts.
In October this year, I headed to the US battleground states to talk to people preparing to vote in the presidential election. The study was result neutral. It didn't matter to me how these people were voting, although obviously it mattered to them. But I wanted to find out, in a contest that the polls were saying was too close to call, what was really going on. What lessons could we learn from a contest like this for other elections? What could it tell us about voter intentions? What would it tell us about America? To do this properly, I used what are well-known and established interview techniques from focus groups. Researchers have been doing this for years. They're not trying to just understand what people think, but how and why they think about an issue. And it gives you a more enduring sense of what's really behind their thinking. You could easily ask someone, how are you going to vote? And you'll get an answer. But if you start tapping into how they approach that decision that they've made, it's a far more insightful way of understanding the why, not the what. You don't want just yeses and nos. You really want to understand why. And you keep probing and you are trying to understand how someone thinks, not what they think. This episode will look at what happened and how it happened. What I found surprised me on multiple levels, even as a veteran of several election campaigns. It became clear to me, crystal clear, early on in my road trip through the heartland of America, that the result was going to hinge on voter turnout. Which of the two candidates could mobilise enough of their base to front up on election day? Now, obviously that's something that doesn't have much relevance in Australia, given our compulsory voting system. But in very, very tight contests, there are lessons we can learn. I was surprised and charmed by the love that Americans have for their country, their loyalty, their passion. I do think that we have lessons in this for voter intentions in Australia. Ultimately, though, what struck me about this campaign as I was going through these critical states and right through to election day was the transactional nature of this particular election for supporters of both candidates. This wasn't about electing a homecoming king or queen. This was a deal that Americans were entering into for their future. I formed a view very quickly that Trump was put on the ballot by Democrats and Republicans. He's on both sides of the ballot. For Democrats, he was a reason to vote for Harris. Voting against Trump was viable, and it had to be done via her. On his side of the ballot, vote for Trump to change the course of America. He was on both sides. She was in some ways a diminished presence on the ballot paper because of that equation. it's easy to forget that Ms. Harris was not a popular vice president. Her published poll numbers were very low. She was not seen as a strong candidate before Biden withdrew, but to the point of a transaction, they went, I'll take that. I'll need that. And you're the person who's going to stop Trump. But she wouldn't have been the ideal candidate if you were going to propose to Americans who wanted to vote Democrat. She was what they had, and they thought she could do the job. And clearly she did not. I met this mother and son in West Virginia, in a town that might best be described as a college town. And we're in West Virginia, which is a state that had a very strong coal mining heritage. And obviously things have changed over time, but it votes red. It definitely has a Republican tinge to it. But in a college town, you expected slightly different dynamic. And we found her in a bar in this college town, and she was very happy to share why she thought the way she did about the big issues. She went straight to why she needed to vote for Harris, not why she really wanted to. And time again, I heard about families that were divided. We heard about how America's divided, but it was always interesting to see that at a very micro level. When you went to Thanksgiving dinner and you knew that you were going to get into a barney over politics. So it was interesting to hear at that very micro level, a mother and a son who had diametrically opposed views, how they were dealing with it and why they came to their decisions from very different places.
So what do you mean? What don't you get? When you say you don't get the election or the people or what they're doing?
I don't understand, given the information that is readily available to everyone, how anyone can support the fascist. I just don't get it. And I will say this, I'm a lesbian, so LGBTQ rights are super important to me. My son, who was raised by two women, is a Trumper. And I fucking don't get it. I don't
That's
get it.
really, really interesting. And has he tried to explain it to you why he supports Trump?
I can't talk to him about it. I can't. I know he does, and I'm like, we can't talk about this because I love him and I don't want to cause a rift in the relationship. I know I'm going to get angry. And so I'm like, I don't go there. I don't go there.
Politics is a no-go in the family.
It is. So you might want to talk to him about it, but I can't do it.
And what's a big issue for you when you talk about, Donald Trump in that way? Is there a particular issue that is making you support Harris for that reason, or have you just, are you voting, for example? A lot of Americans we've met have voted. You voted already.
I voted today. Yes, I did. I won't say that I'm particularly pro-Harris. I just think anything would be preferable to Trump. I really do. I mean, he's talked about terminating the Constitution. He's talked about using the military against his political opponents, American citizens who don't agree with him. And he's talked about, why can't my generals be like Hitler's generals? I just don't understand how anybody isn't alarmed by that enough to say this is a non-starter. Like, this guy, there's no way. But my son, who is very well educated, smart, studies, he actually would tell you that he lives and breathes this to the point that he can't sleep. Like, he studies and he reads and he dives deep and he's Trump. People take offense to everything these days. It's like you can't, the political correctness has gone too far, and I think that has put people even in the middle, it's put them off. And I don't disagree with that. So what I'm looking for is somebody to be sensible, bring us all back together, because I really believe that I believe that the majority of Americans, the vast majority, have the same values. But I think that the politicians are intentionally dividing us on the fringe issues, and not enough people like me are seeing that and saying, okay, time out. But I want a leader that's going to make us see that and I don't know if that exists, but that's what I'm looking for.
And what was one reason you have voted for Kamala Harris?
She talks about unifying us. I think she's honest. I think that she admits that her mind can be changed when circumstances change. She is not all about her. She's about us. And I believe that's genuine. She's always fought for the people her whole career. He's never done anything but fight for him.
I'm glad we did get to talk because her honest appraisal of the two candidates was of great interest. And more importantly, the way she was able to very practically explain to me why she needed Harris, didn't love her, but needed her to stop something she thought was a much greater force for bad. In talking about how she came to decide she was voting Democrat, she explained very clearly why her son was not that way inclined. And once she explained to me that they couldn't talk about politics, she asked me to try and find the son to ask him why and to share that view with her. I was the interlocutor between the two. And I did. I sought him and I found his views fascinating.
Tell me again about when you decided that you were going to be voting for Donald Trump.
Yeah, it wasn't long after the Butler rally on July 13th when there was the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. I'd had a friend visiting from Germany. It was his first time in the United States, and he was saying, I really want to have the most American experience possible, right? So I was like, okay, I have an idea. So I was like, Trump's going to be in Butler. That's not that far. Let's go to the rally. And at the time, I was torn between, am I going to vote for RFK or am I going to vote for Trump? What am I going to do? RFK hadn't dropped out yet. Joe Biden hadn't dropped out yet. But, witnessing what I saw and then everything that happened subsequent to that, it was really probably within the days after that I was like, okay, I'm voting for this guy, for Donald Trump.
What's big on your mind as to what matters at this election? I think it's important to me to return to what I see as sanity. I mean, also, I think, it's important to note, when I was in law school, my concentrations were national security, international law, constitutional law. I'm very concerned with, American values and principles, the things that, we consider to be fundamental. I'm concerned with foreign wars, foreign affairs. So those types of things are on my mind, staying out of war, bringing back peace. Bringing back sort of sane, common sense, sort of foundational American principles to the forefront. That's important.
And do you think that other Americans share that? Or what's your observation about what you're seeing, whether it's in the polls or in your friends or the community? What's on their mind?
Okay, so I think there are kind of two answers to that question. I think fundamentally when you talk to Americans, regardless of what they think and what they believe, the values are very similar. People don't realize that. But I think what you see in the media and on the surface, when the conversation becomes political and not just sort of philosophical or maybe even sociological, then that division starts to come out. And I think a lot of times people don't even realize that there aren't as fundamental differences as maybe they think when the conversation gets heated.
See, that's interesting, Vish, from an Australian perspective, far, far away. We look at America as a nation divided, and that might be media commentary, etc., but you actually see something quite different.
No, I don't think at the core it's as divided as it appears. I think it certainly is divided. What I mean by that is, I think if people actually sat in a room together and talked about ideas and talk about how they feel about certain things and about people and about their neighbors, that you'd find a lot more in common. I think what's happening is, I mean, frankly, and I know this is sort of cliche to say, but I think our media is doing us a tremendous disservice. I think it's stoking the flame, sort of leaning into talking points that are, from my point of view, frankly, baseless. I think that is going to make people polarized. That's going to make people, sort of get at each other's throats, even though those same people that they sat down and talked to each other would probably have more in common than they know.
One last question for you, that is, met quite a few Americans who won't vote. They said they're simply not interested in voting for either of them, or they have other reasons, but they just won't vote. What do you think is happening? Why is that the case? Because it's odd for Australians to think about this and not vote, because we have compulsory voting. So what do you think is going on
I think people have a lot of distrust in the election system, rightfully and wrongfully. I mean, I think there's a lot of certainly overblown or perhaps misunderstood information from 2020. So I don't want to speak to, sort of black and white. But I do think there's mistrust. And I also think, look, let me tell you a little bit about my background. In 2016, I was a Bernie Sanders supporter. And then we watched the way that the DNC sort of screwed him over. And I think that's pretty common knowledge at this point. And I think you have other people that were like, I've been screwed out of the candidate that I wanted to win 3 times. Bernie Sanders in 2016, Bernie Sanders in 2020, RFK this year with all the lawfare against RFK Jr. And those people have said, you know what? The answer is not for me to go to this ballot box and cast a vote that I don't think's going to count.
It's easy to describe younger voters as being disengaged, but I kept finding people who had thought about the issues. They weren't necessarily thinking about all the issues. It wasn't a broad opinion about politics. They had their narrow views. And I don't mean that in a bad way. They knew what was important to them. And he was a perfect example of someone who had clearly done his homework. He wasn't just influenced by something he saw on TikTok. He had gone and done some research. As his mother noted, she, in a sense, in no way was describing him as ignorant or dumb. Far from it. She said, no, he's really thought about it. And that was quite an interesting phenomenon. They are engaged on the 2-3 issues that really matter to them, not all 20 that's up for grabs in a smorgasbord at an election. They know what they care about, they go deep on it, and they make a decision. And that's what he was doing. There's no doubt that the data shows that there is a realignment across what we know as party politics. It's clear that there is a change occurring. It's hard to know whether it's a final evolution, but if you look at the results, there is a clear trend that the Republican Party now represents totally different demographics and psychographics to what it would have represented 10, 15 years ago. You are seeing a reversal. The Democrats represent almost the exact opposite of what the Republicans do based on that data. That is intriguing. Is that the case in Australia? There are trends that the movement is in the same way. That is a realignment of significant consequence. What Trump did was proof that it's happening. It's difficult to know where it ends, though. Is this permanent? Have we really flipped what the two parties represent in the United States? And that's difficult to know if it's permanent. But the trend lines are very clear. There is something going on, and it's interesting. If you take, say, 5 key metrics, who voted for Republicans 15, 20 years ago? So you'd have on education, on income, on geography, et cetera, you'd have these very simple, that's who votes Republican and that's who votes Democrats. The scramble would mean that it's all over the place. You can't predict it. The transformation or the realignment actually means, no, we now see a complete flip and we know exactly the pattern, and it is a reversal. One of the Trump rallies was organised for a town called State College. It's actually called State College because the State College dominates the whole town. It's just one of those things. And it is a cliched small town defined by the campus. It's an extraordinary place. The facilities are amazing. There was their football stadium, a college football stadium, had a capacity of 100,000. It's bigger than the SCG and equaling almost the MCG. Amazing college experience. Trump decided to have a rally there, or his people rather. So it was well placed for a classic Pennsylvania battleground rally. So you're lining up with all the good and the great who are coming along to hear Trump. And it is quite a procedure. You line up, which is mostly efficient, and it might take probably 45 minutes. And there's just people streaming in. And you are in the middle of pretty much nowhere in this town in Pennsylvania. And as you're speaking to people in the line, they're telling you, I've travelled an hour. I've come from 2 hours away. I've come from 6 minutes away from this town. It was drawing out all sorts of people from what is a clearly battleground state. And the whole rally process is about the comfort given to people who are, for the most part, already pretty sure they're voting for Donald Trump. You don't really get a sense that this was about the persuadables. It would be interesting to think there was anyone amongst the 20,000 people who were in that rally that were there to decide. You really get the sense they were there to affirm and confirm their positions. But nonetheless, in they come in their masses, thousands of people. They sit through the waiting and then the warm-up, a series of kind of second grade apparatchiks and the like who come and rev you up with some cliches and campaign slogans. And then you wait and you wait. And interestingly, it was a common feature of Trump rallies that you had to wait because he was often late and advertised time meant nothing. On this occasion in Pennsylvania, it was just a 1.5 hour wait. But amongst the crowd, they all talked about how a previous rally was a 3-hour delay, a 4-hour delay. So we were quite lucky at only an hour and a half. And then the man himself comes and he delivers. He delivers exactly what these people want to hear. I met these young men in the queue waiting to get into the rally. 3 very average looking males, probably around 21, 22 tops, probably 20 would describe them. And they just seemed like very average people. They weren't overly adorned with Trump paraphernalia, very straightforward types who were lining up just like me to get into this Trump rally. And the minute I asked if they'd be kind enough to share some views, they were more than happy to. And again, which is a common theme all the way through this experience, this journey, they had really strong views. They expressed them really clearly, and they were really happy to explain why they thought what they did.
So I guess what we're trying to explain to everyone back in Australia is, what is it about this election that you think is, what are the issues that are on your mind? What's driving you to come out to a rally, to vote for Donald Trump? What are the big things that's on your agenda?
I would just say number one's got to be the economy for me, because like being a college student, like everything's so much more expensive, and every year I've been in college, things have continued to get more expensive, and that affects my bottom line as a college student. You know what I mean? So as far as I'm concerned, it's the economy, and number two's got to be the border and securing that for our future as well.
Yeah, I agree. Those two things are the biggest things, the economy and the border, especially the border right now, just because the economy is struggling right now and we're allowing so many illegal immigrants in. It's not helping the economy.
And what are you actually looking for in the next president? Like, what are the qualities you want? If you're here at this rally, you've probably made your choice, but what is it that you want in the next president? What are you looking for?
A strong leader, honestly. Someone who can really take charge. And, Trump's been in office before, so he knows what to do. So I trust him in his judgment.
Well, you'll hear Democrats and liberals a lot of the time. They'll be like, oh, he's a Nazi, he's going to use the police power against the people. But my question to them would be, if he was already in office, why didn't he do it the first time around?
And what do you think other Americans who aren't voting for Donald Trump, why do you think that's the case? What's on their mind that's different to how you see the next 4 years?
I think a lot of the priority with people on the other side of this wall is essentially like, their body, their choice, or like transgender rights and whatnot. And that's cool, but like, can we look at the bigger picture here and like think about the entire country, not just yourself?
You can always nominate what your top 3 issues are, and they may well be different to what are the top issues that are defining your vote now. What are you going to vote on tomorrow? If the economy is their number one concern, and we know from most credible polls, the economy was the number one common issue, for whether you were voting Republican or Democrat. For Democrats, it was other things like abortion. But the number one common issue for both sides was the economy. So there would be many Americans who were wondering, well, who's best to manage the economy? And in many ways, we saw a very practical expression of that. We know that since the defining reversal of the Roe versus Wade decision, a number of states across America have moved to make practical changes. They have moved to protect abortion rights, or reproductive rights, as it's often called. We also know that at this election, on the ballot was a whole bunch of states saying, what do you want to do about abortion? Pro, against, etc. There were practical moves to protect abortion rights, and that leads us to conclude one important point. Even if abortion was important to you, you felt that it was being sorted. There was a way that you were getting what you needed on abortion, which is packed away, good, done. Now I'll look at the rest of the agenda and I'll make a decision about what's best for me over the next 4 years. And that's what people sometimes don't understand. The difference between an important issue and a salient issue. And that's what we saw at this election. Abortion rights was the perfect example of what happens when an issue may well be important to you, but it isn't necessarily the one deciding your vote.
What do you think's on the mind of Democrat voters?
Back before Trump started doing all this, the news was widely trusted in America, and I think that there's data showing that it is largely rejected, actually, especially among conservatives, and it's even starting to get rejected among some liberals as well. So I think a lot of Democrats proportionately watch more of the mainstream media, and that sort of feeds into their beliefs, but a lot of conservatives don't, and that's kind of why you're seeing this great awakening.
And you're all at college?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And what do you make of how your fellow students are voting? Is there a classification? If you're a college student, you're more likely to vote Democrat, or what's your experience on campus?
Well, a lot of the people at this campus will say, put you out if you're a Trump supporter, because they think, Kamala all the way. This is a largely liberal school. But we look at this, and this rally has brought so many people to this area and brought so many people out of their apartments to come and be supportive. So we see that there actually is a good amount of people that support Trump.
Yeah, I really do think that we're a silent majority. Maybe not on Penn State's campus, because there's the voter registration. Center County usually does go blue pretty handily just because of Penn State, but I do think that this election is a little bit different than elections past.
One of the things that we've noticed is that people want to use their vote for Donald Trump to get something done about the way America is leaning. Have you got any thoughts on that? Like, what are your motivations for putting Donald Trump into office?
Yeah, so my biggest thing is just give him another chance, really, because I thought he did a lot of great things in his first term, but on the other side of that coin, a lot of his first term was really stifled by a lot of the Democrat filibusters in Congress and whatnot. So he wasn't actually able to get his full agenda done. And he also had a lot of people in power that he actually gave power that turned out to be incredibly corrupt and led to a lot of the COVID lockdowns and whatnot. So I hope that he's learned from his mistakes, because I'm still upset with him about a lot of the people that he actually put into those positions. So I'm really giving him another chance, giving him some grace here with this election, really trusting that he has our interests at heart and that he's learned from those mistakes, and he's going to put the right people in place to really conduct what he needs to do to get the country back on track.
That's a really interesting point about trust. So America gave him a chance last time, and what do you think of the idea of trusting him again?
It's kind of funny how a lot of liberals, refer to him as Hitler and stuff like that, and how his presidency, he'll be a dictator and things like that. But we have 4 years of evidence, and he was nothing like that, and our economy was great, and our country was doing really well when he was in office. We had no foreign wars started in his presidency. He defeated ISIS, things like that. I mean, the liberal media and everybody else saying that he's going to be a dictator and stuff like that, it's not true, and it's all they got really is to try to make him seem like such a bad person and everything like that, just to make people not want to vote for him.
And what do you think America would be like after another 4 years of a Trump presidency?
I think the first thing you would see is respect for America again. I think right now foreign countries don't respect us as much as they did when he was in office. I mean, there was countries that feared America because Trump was in office, because, like we said before, Trump doesn't care what people think about him and stuff like that. So, we got to put him in office again, because one, the economy is going to switch really fast. He's a businessman. He knows how to work the economy. So that's one big thing, as well as the border. I mean, he wanted to build the wall. He built parts of the wall. I think he's going to finish that. That's going to be a big thing. And it's not because we want to keep, I think that's another misconception. It's not that we want to keep immigrants out. It's what we want them to do it the right way. We need them to be vetted so we know who's coming into our country. You think that would be common sense. For a lot of countries it is, but for half of America, they don't seem to understand that.
And why is it important for you that America is respected by other countries? Do you need their respect?
I just think that I believe that America is the greatest country in the world. So I want to be great. You know, I want this country to be great just to help the world. You know, that's my viewpoint on it. And I think when America's strong and America is, you know, helping other countries, helping the world, I think that the world's a lot better place.
In a number of cities in the United States, there has been a rapid influx of immigration. You see people on the streets who clearly haven't been properly assimilated culturally, economically, physically. It's there to be seen. They haven't necessarily handled it well because, to be blunt, the numbers are overwhelming. We also have a concept that we're not familiar with in Australia, which is the asylum status of some cities, where they proactively accept migrants or immigrants, some illegal, undocumented, whatever the term you use. But they take them and then they don't necessarily manage the integration very well. And so, yes, there are people very much in your face, and you sense that. Controlling your border is a proxy for what else don't we control? If we don't control who comes into the country, what else do we not have a sense of certainty and destiny about? That's a very emotional perspective. It's a sense of security, and that applies to a whole range of things. People like to feel that they know what the future means. What does it hold? And immigration, or rather the way people have described the Democrats' lack of control over it, has concerned them. And that's not just amongst Republican voters. It's not just in the normal red states. You do see people in cities like New York, people are confronted by the changes, the rapid changes in what they see. It's a very optical expression of a loss of control or a change in circumstances. You really do sense it. And you do see the vote shift to the right, not necessarily in great numbers. New York's not suddenly going and didn't go Trump, but there were movements. People are reacting to something that they don't necessarily like the look of. I'm not judging them for that. They're allowed to feel discomforted by that change, but it wasn't just a Republican-Democrat thing. It was a way to think, I don't know that we're on top of that, and they don't like it. People often talk about John Howard's immigration policies and a particularly what might be described as hardline approach. But what they often forget is that when our borders were, to use the term, under control, we also saw a massive increase in immigration. But the optics weren't the issue. People didn't think that our borders were out of control. We just accepted lots of migrants. It's when you think and see that we're out of control that you're troubled by it. And that's probably the best way of explaining the immigration issue. It's very visual. It's very much in your face. And that is the key to understanding why people are troubled by the immigration issue from both the left and the right. Elections are always about the future, and we often forget that because we think, oh, he or she didn't do that and their record is this and that. But most voters overwhelmingly are thinking about the next 3 years or the next 4 years. The past, from a candidate's perspective, is an opportunity to prove that what they're about to promise for the future is credible. Because, yeah, they did do that. They're telling me they're going to build 6 bridges. Actually, the last time they had a chance, they did actually, so it's credible that they will. Elections are always a vote on the future. And that's what, almost to a person, these decent Americans were trying to say to me, that they're thinking ahead. Yes, they're factoring in the past. His, hers, Biden's, all of that, yes, but it's ultimately what will be better for me in the future. It was a vote on the future. I came across two women decked out head to toe in Trump paraphernalia. As it turned out, they were sisters.
What's the issue that most dominates why you're voting the way you're voting?
I have several, but I would say first and foremost is the economy. And Donald Trump, as a business owner, knows how to run a business. And the United States is the biggest business in the world. We need someone who can handle running a business and all aspects of the business, rather than people coming into office who have no experience running a business and are more just about power and politics rather than about the common person in the United States.
But what's wrong with the economy? All the indicators say that it's starting to improve, but you have that as your number one issue. What most concerns you about the American economy?
Right now, the prices for everyday people. A lot of people are out of touch with that are in the upper echelon, and it really doesn't affect their pocketbook. But I think one of the main contributing factors was taking our fuel independence away and being able to be independent with our energy. We were able to sell to other countries, which was going to help pour money back into the American economy. So I think we need to stabilize that for future generations. We're losing that right now.
So if Donald Trump wins, what do you think will be different about America over the next 4 years?
Well, I think he's going to send back all the illegals, at least the worst ones. And that's going to free up a lot of money for the American citizens, because what they're giving them, they're taking from the poor here that need it more.
How does immigration matter to you? I mean, are you from Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Yeah, and you're a long way away from the borders. So what is it that most troubles you about what's happening with immigration?
I think mostly that we are putting them on social programs right off the bat, which is going to take from the American people because it's going to have to be financed by our taxes. And instead of it going to our issues and our citizens, it's going to people right off the bat that committed a crime to get here. And it's also feeding into that government taking care of you like daddy instead of taking care of us, and we need to be, we're working class Americans for the most part in this region, and we're paying in, and people that aren't are taking out.
Yeah. What sort of qualities are you looking for in the next president? Like, what do you want in that leader?
Strength for one thing, the main thing.
What do you want in the next leader? What qualities are you looking for?
Well, strength, like she said, is a big one. I don't think he's afraid of anybody. I think he'll step up there to all these other people and stand his ground. He's not afraid of them, and we need that. I think Kamala's going to tumble when people ask her, they're not going to respect her the way they will him.
She already caves under pressure. She did take 2 days off this week.
Trump appealed to more voters in more of those contests where it was evens. There's a reason why they call it a battleground state, and it's because based on previous results and polling, it's hard to know who's going to win. It's that sense of 50-50, what we would describe as a marginal seat. They have marginal states almost. And on that basis, Trump had worked out how to appeal to more of those people in those particular states. And that takes us to a very simple concept, the transaction. It tells us that I have to make a deal of some kind, a deal with myself as much as it's a deal with you. I'm going to accept all your flaws, or I'm going to accept what I need from you, and I'll do what I need to do. I'm going to give you my vote, and you're going to give me what I need. And that was the deal. A transaction is actually quite a rational proposition. You need to do two things. You need to persuade people by facts, reason, but you need to motivate that by emotion. a transaction kind of requires both. You need to show them rationally why, on balance, this is the deal for you, and then have enough juice in the tank to get them to come out and vote for you. So you've got to put a little bit of emotion back into it. Having done the deal on the rational, you're then getting them to vote on the emotional.
It is now clear that we've achieved the most incredible political thing. Look what happened. Is this crazy? God bless you and God bless America. Thank you very much.